Hi there, this is Amrita Tripathi, and this is a new episode of a new series. I'm actually someone who's had an interesting 20 plus year career. I've been a journalist, I've been a news anchor, a broadcast journalist. I've done a lot of consulting before making the switch to tech and really focusing on digital media. Quick intro in terms of why I wanted to share some of what I've been learning is the last year and a half I've been on this insane blitzkrieg of trying to sort of upskill. That's what I've been telling people. But several years ago, I decided to do a couple of these master classes. I am a writer and I am a reader, and I was absolutely obsessed with a couple of these master classes. One was with Margaret Atwood, and I still remember being very excited about that one and having someone tell me, well, she's not actually talking to you directly. Well, I'll tell you what, it felt like she was. I took a ton of notes, and I'm going to share a little bit of that in today's session. I'd love to know from you what you'd like to learn with me about, if that makes any sense. I'd love to know what you'd like to learn about. I have been doing several courses. I've been telling people about the leadership stuff, certainly emotional agility. But today I'm going to do something which is much closer to my heart, which I'm much more comfortable talking to you all about, which is writing. We are going to be kicking off a masterclass ourselves very soon. Well, I don't want to call it a masterclass, but it's definitely going to be a writing module, just by virtue of, my writing career. And I'm just popping that onto the screen. I started out with the one on the extreme right, which is Broken News. It was a short novel about the drama and dysfunction set in a newsroom. So totally a work of fiction. It came out, right as I was turning 30, or right before I turned 30. In fact, I followed that up with The Sibious Knot, a pretty dark work of contemporary fiction that, both of these books really look at the fragility of relationships in kind of an urban setting. And after those two novels, I've taken a huge pause actually on the fiction, and I've been writing nonfiction. I've been working with psychologists and psychiatrists, especially based on the work I've been doing with the Health Collective, an initiative around mental health storytelling, which has been around 8 years this month. So we have the 3 books of the Mindscape series published by Simon & Schuster India. Real Stories of Dealing with Depression, co-authored with Arpita Anand, the wonderful psychologist and therapist. We have Young Mental Health, co-authored with the wonderful therapist Meera Haran Alva, who's based in Bengaluru, and Age of Anxiety with the wonderful Kamna Chibber as well. And then, we did have this final book in that sort of space, I would say, which is kind of where I've decided to take a pause. I was invited by Dr. Amrita Tripathi and Dr. Abhijit Nadkarni to work on a book with them on suicide prevention that's called Life Interrupted. So I've really, worked on my own craft. I've really figured out sort of my writing style, my voice, and I hope to have some news for you on that front coming up pretty soon. But this is kind of why I wanted to talk to you about writing, because the number one question I get from people is, hey, how do you write a book? Many of us feel like we have a book in us. They say this about journalists, that every journalist has a book in them. I'm inclined to agree, actually, especially reporters who go out and see so much. But even if you're on the desk and you're sort of interacting with, news, current affairs, and human life on such a scale, it's not just journalists, though, of course. Many of us have stories we want to tell. There are many ways of exploring that, especially nowadays. And I think I'd encourage any of you who are interested in, exploring your own sort of writing style or your creative writing, just go for it. That is literally what I tell people. Just start with something. Everything is not meant to be published. Some things are just you practicing. The more you practice, the better you get. It is a craft. There are things to learn. And as I'm going to share in the next few minutes from that masterclass with Margaret Atwood that I was obsessed with, there are certainly things that each of us can learn. So this is a masterclass, and Margaret Atwood has done that phenomenal writer. Many of you have read The Handmaid's Tale, I hope you've seen it. I saw the first season. To be honest, I was very, very depressed and I didn't watch the rest of it, but love the book. What an incredible, iconic writer she is. And, in her masterclass, she says a couple of really interesting things, actually more than a couple. I'm going to share a few interesting things, and I highly recommend, if you can, do the masterclass itself. All you have are the words. They're inert until the readers engage. This is the most participative of arts, she says. I love that. When you think about a book you've read or a story you love, isn't it true that you bring so much of yourself to it? almost as much as a writer has done themselves, right? So I might write a book, or I might read a book where I, at 15, had certainly a different experience while reading that very same book that I would have at 25, at 35, maybe even 45. I think it's really fascinating that it is a participative art. I think it is one of those things where we bring our entire selves, we're kind of making up the story with the actual author. Not the entire story, of course, but we're filling in the blanks. It's our imagination that's, putting in the color, adding the nuance, and just, kind of embarking on that adventure with the writers, the good writers. They're not all great writers, and that's also fine. I think it's okay. Everyone's not going to be an incredible writer. I'm not a snob about reading. I said this in another way recently for a little video for Kunzum. I'm definitely not a snob about reading. I'm not a snob about genre, and I'm not a snob about format. If you prefer audiobooks, you prefer audiobooks. If you prefer, reading on a Kindle over a physical book, that is your preference. You do you. I'm also not a snob, as you can see, including the way I write, not a snob about genre. You might like fiction. Some people say they like non-fiction better. Some people like fantasy within fiction. Some people like young adult fiction. Some people like literary fiction. I have actually a taste for a lot of different kinds of genres. I'm interested in many different things. I do have a pet peeve about people saying that they hate either non-fiction or fiction, but we'll come to that in another video, I'm sure. Now, Margaret Atwood, in this fascinating Masterclass, also says somewhere that she never starts with the idea. Think about that for a second, because when somebody tells you, hey, listen, start, you might be thinking like, okay, some of them have the idea already. And she actually says when people are teaching, they're probably okay starting with an idea. But she said writers usually start with characters or voices or scenes. There are books that have started with objects. She's also from that era of like handwriting. Oh my God, I actually handwrote my first book as well. It was awesome. I don't know if I'd go back to that, but there's something different about putting pen to paper. I will give you a couple more tips from her. She says that, you don't always have to write linearly. You don't have to write to the end and then start again. There's no one rule that's going to work for everyone. That's something I do want to say that I completely believe as well. And I'm going to say that, I love this note that I took where she says, nobody knows where ideas come from. Immerse yourself and you're going to get ideas. I think these are 2 or 3 critical, takeaways. We'll do a follow-up video as well once I know that, I'm not just talking into the void. Actually, I'm quite capable of just talking into the void as well. I'll do a follow-up video to this. But you don't have to have that big idea to start. If there's a story bubbling up inside you, start. What you want to do is also have the skill set ready to go. I don't think you need to wait for inspiration. I think you can, give yourself some writing exercises. Many of us are working, jobs, sometimes multiple gigs in this gig economy. We have multiple priorities. The trick is to really carve out time for yourself to write. And it has to be at a regular cadence. I have to follow this myself, but I've actually also just submitted a manuscript. So I'm giving myself a little bit of a break on that front. But you have to carve out that time. It might not be daily. I don't think it's possible for it to be daily for everybody, but it might be every weekend. It might be Saturday, crack of dawn before everyone else in the family wakes up. It might be Sunday morning. It might be Sunday afternoon. But you need to be sitting down with nothing else in your calendar for that hour, 2 hours. And, of course, out of those 2 hours, you're not going to be writing the whole time. I really think it's a great idea to put off the Wi-Fi, like put off the internet and just block off that time, let your mind settle down. Once you start getting into that routine, once you start sitting in that one chair, that one table, ideally, your own nook just for the writing, that'll be that, if in a perfect world, that would be what we would all do. You're going to find, especially if you have that idea bubbling up. Again, it's not for everyone. I think it's perfectly fine. If you have that idea bubbling up, that story you're dying to tell, start making time and start writing. There's no other way to do it. So you could try this inroads, like Margaret Atwood says, people do try starting with the character, the scene, the voice. There might be one character and voice that comes to you, and you just start putting it down and you start noticing the magic that happens. Okay, I'm going to stop there because this has been a pretty long video. Tell me what you think. Tell me if you want to hear more about this. I think we'll do one more follow-up video because I have so many notes from that masterclass in handwriting, as you can see. And I'll also share some more of what I've been learning for this new series. Thanks for watching.